It's been already more than 3 years that we haven't had a pandemic, but the WHO, the WEF, Bill Gates, and a lot of the global elite, the satanic elite, have been all this time telling us and alerting us that we were going to have a real bad pandemic coming on the world, much worse than the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. And so that's why, as a watchman and prophet of God, I created this podcast, which I have titled, "Are you ready for the new virus pandemic that they're cooking up for us this month?" Please join me.
The New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries present the Messenger of the Lord with Apostle Yeshua, preaching the gospel of the good news of the kingdom of God and informing you about world events in the light of Bible prophecy and preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Apostle Yeshua.
It seems that the Chinese and the WHO are at it again, along with the powerful global elite Jesuit scientists at the lab, who are already cooking up a new viral disease called Virus X to again release into the world like they did with COVID-19 back in 2020. So you need to be prepared for this new viral scourge coming up now this March of 2024. How gene editing could be used as a weapon and what to do about it. It has been over 3 years since the World Health Organization, the WHO, declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And perhaps the most important lesson is that we were completely unprepared to face the debilitating virus. This raises some scary thoughts. What if the threat wasn't COVID-19, but a gene-edited pathogen designed to turn us into zombies, ghost-like, agitated, eerie, gruesome, cannibalist creatures with little awareness of our surroundings? With recent advances in gene editing, it may be possible for bioterrorists to design viruses capable of altering our behavior, spreading such a disease, and finally and ultimately killing us. And the reality and the chances are that we still wouldn't be sufficiently prepared to deal with it. Zombie apocalypse may sound far-fetched, reserved for the annals of graphic novels, immersive gaming experiences, and popular culture. But there are real and true examples of zombification in nature. Perhaps the most well-known is rabies, which can cause aggression and hallucination, and is almost always fatal once symptoms appear. But there are others. A recently discovered kind of wasp, for example, can turn a particular species of spider, Anelosimus eximius, into zombies by laying eggs on their abdomen. The resulting larvae then attaches itself to the spider, feeding on it, while the spider, once a social individual, leaves the colony and prepares to die alone. Other zombification examples from nature include the African sleeping sickness, a fatal neurological condition created by insect-borne parasites and bacteria, and then there's the infamous Ophiocordyceps unilateralis fungus, which changes the behavior of carpenter ants before killing them and sprouting out of their heads. So let's talk about weaponizing pathogens. Last year, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry recognized the development of a type of genetic scissors called CRISPR-Cas9. Interesting, this kind of technology has been simmering for a long while with equal doses of excitement and fear because of its ability to edit the human genome with unprecedented precision, replacing a single letter in the DNA. CRISPR has already proven itself useful in treating many and various genetic conditions such as sickle cell disease, beta thalassemia, and many others. But CRISPR Cas9 could theoretically also be used for darker purposes, such as for bioterrorism. It could alter pathogens to make them more transmissible or fatal. Alternatively, it could turn a non-pathogen such as a harmless microbe into an aggressive virus, just like the upcoming virus X, for example. The technique may even be able to alter a virus in such a way to make it dangerous for a larger range of species than it currently infects, or make it resistant to antibiotics or antivirals. Whether CRISPR could be used to infect humans in a way to make them zombie-like remains a theoretical speculation. At the moment, there are probably easier ways to terrorize people. But as biotechnologies improve in the wake of COVID, the risk from bioterrorism is increasing. If a zombie-like disease like virus X could be created, it clearly wouldn't make disease people reawaken as zombies, but as an infection that passed through saliva with extremely high transmission and mortality rate, and which would have caused agitation, destructive behavior, and death, wouldn't be too far off from the horror that we see in zombie movies. Such a virus would spread rapidly from human to human in a similar manner to diseases such as Ebola and Marburg viruses. In the epic zombie film 28 Days Later, the fictitious rage virus was in fact inspired by these two real-life viruses. Given these possibilities, it is not surprising that the director of the U.S. National Intelligence, James Clapper, turned gene editing weapons of mass destruction and proliferation in 2018. Many countries are aware of the risks. In 2018, the U.S. government released its first biodefense strategy involving multiple government agencies. The plan covers not only delivered bioterror threats, but also possible international or naturally occurring outbreaks and infectious diseases that may be able to escape a lab accidentally, like what we have seen with the COVID-19 taking place in Wuhan, China in 2020. And curiously enough, the U.S. Department of Defense Strategic Command Unit has already issued a training program called CONOP 8888 Counter Zombie Dominance, which simulates a zombie-like type of apocalypse situation. However, according to them, this was designed to be completely fictitious, providing military and defense training without the need to involve real classified information. So what is Disease X? How scientists are preparing for the next pandemic? It sounds like something Elon Musk might have cooked up. Disease X. In fact, the term was coined years ago as a way of getting scientists to work on medical countermeasures for unknown infectious threats. Novel coronaviruses like the one that caused COVID-19, for example, instead of just well-known ones like the Ebola virus. The idea was to encourage the development of certain platform technologies, including vaccines, drug therapies, and diagnostic tests that could be rapidly adapted and deployed in response to an array of future outbreaks with epidemic or pandemic potential. So again, what is Disease X? It's the somewhat mysterious name for an illness caused by a currently unknown yet serious microbial threat. The World Health Organization added Disease X in 2017 to a short list of pathogens deemed a top priority for research, alongside known killers like severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, and Ebola. The issue made it even onto the agenda of the WEF, the World Economic Forum, in Davos, Switzerland, with WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus joining other health officials to discuss it. The vast reservoir of viruses circulating in wildlife are seen as a likely source of more such diseases. That is because of their potential to spill over and infect other species, including humans, giving rise to an infection against which people will have no immunity. So what's the point of studying disease X? As WHO puts it, it is to enable early cross-cutting R&D preparedness that is also relevant for an unknown disease. The humanitarian crisis sparked by the 2014 to 2016 Ebola epidemic in West Africa was a wake-up call. Despite decades of research, there were no products ready to deploy in time to save more than 11,000 lives. In response, the WHO created a research and development blueprint to accelerate development of a range of tools for priority diseases, quote-unquote. The current list includes COVID-19, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, Ebola virus disease and Marburg virus disease, Lassa fever, Middle East respiratory syndrome or MERS, and SARS, Nipah and henipaviral diseases, Rift Valley fever, Zika, disease X. How is the research for the next pandemic going? It took just 326 days from the release of the genetic sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus to the authorization of the first COVID-19 vaccine, thanks in part to the work done since 2017 in preparation for disease X. Now, under a US $3.5 billion, $4.8 billion plan, certain groups like the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI, are supporting rapid response vaccine platforms that could develop new immunizations within 100 days of a virus with pandemic potential emerging. Other efforts underway include updating the international health regulations and developing a new global agreement to protect the world from future emergencies. A new fund approved by the World Bank for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. A WHO hub for pandemic and epidemic intelligence in Berlin that aims to speed access to key data and develop analytic tools and predictive models to assess potential threats. The Global Bureau project that aims to discover zoonotic viral threats and stop future pandemics. A US $5 billion US government initiative to develop next generation vaccines and treatments for COVID-19 called Project Next Gen. US $262.5 million in funding for a U.S. national network for detecting and responding more efficiently to public health emergencies. An establishment of Global Center for Pandemic Therapeutics. Still, many challenges threaten to undermine these efforts, including depleted and weakened health systems, a growing very anti-science movement that has increased vaccine hesitancy, and the potential for governments to eventually deprioritize funding for outbreak detection and preparedness as perceived risks dissipate. The world needs to start preparing for the next pandemic now, according to top WHO official. Singapore. To avert a repeat of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the world needs to start preparing for the next coming pandemic now. This is even amid the backdrop of a difficult global environment with issues such as inflation and the Ukraine-Middle East crisis competing for attention, says an expert. In a recent interview with the Straits Times on the sidelines of the 7th World One Health Congress on Friday, The World Health Organization's WHO COVID-19 technical lead, Dr. Maria van Kerkhove, said countries need to leverage the trauma of COVID-19 right now to gear up for the next threat. And I quote, "We have to use that horrible situation to build something better. If we don't do it now, we won't do it. We will just go from the next to the next to the next and then be surprised and say, why didn't we use that opportunity?" said the very well-known American epidemiologist. Dr. Van Kerkhove gave a keynote address to close a 5-day Congress held at Sands Expo and Convention Center. It was attended by 2,400 participants, both in person and virtually. In her speech, she said that in order to better tackle emerging threats, 5 C's need to be in place. These are collaborated surveillance in order to pick up on new diseases, emergency coordination such as national action plans for alerting and readying prevention preparedness, access to countermeasures such as fast-track research and development, community protection, and safe and scalable care. Dr. Van Kerkhove told ST that such efforts also need to be supported by a strong workforce and financing for such programs. And I quote, "We have to ensure that we are doing for COVID-19 what we are doing for diseases that we know about fits into the fiscal and political space and into the psyche of all of us in terms of the other challenges we are facing, like economic crisis, war, and climate change," she said. She added that she hopes the legally binding pandemic treaty that the WHO is planning to negotiate and draft represents a promise by countries to prevent a situation like COVID-19. Pandemic preparedness, I would argue, is a constant. People keep using this phrase, peacetime. I don't think there is peacetime. We are constantly moving from fire to fire, and I think we need to ensure that we don't let up, quote unquote. Dr. Kerkhove said the WHO is planning for disease X from different viral families, such as coronaviruses and arboviruses, which are transmitted by mosquitoes. So all our pandemic preparedness right now is being revised based, as always, on a respiratory disease scenario, and then the specifics for the known viral families and known pathogen, quote unquote. She added, "Everything has been focused on COVID-19 for so long that we have to make sure that we don't forget the other work that needs to be done," quote unquote. The WHO is also now currently working tirelessly on approval of a concept for an interactive composite risk map that will include various pathogens to enable for a better prediction of outbreaks or mitigation if it happens. The map will be piloted in 12 countries, including the US, which had not been shortlisted yet. Several years ago, a team of Cornell University researchers used statistical mechanics and techniques using modern disease modeling and in case of critical phenomena to explore how a zombie-like outbreak might spread across the continental United States. The researchers presented their work to the American Physical Society in 2015, and you can even play around with their interactive model, running simulations based on adjustable parameters such as kill-to-buy ratio and the estimated time it might take for a zombie to walk on 1 mile. The idea of a deadly disease that not only kills its hosts, but turns those hosts into deadly vectors for the disease is scary enough to fill an entire genre of horror stories and films. The study authors wrote in their introduction, and I quote, "But at its root, zombieism is just that, a disease, and so should be amenable to the same kind of analysis and study that more traditional diseases have long benefited from. According to these researchers, calculations, most of the United States will have been infested by zombies within 4 weeks. However, the simulations show that even after 4 months, remote areas of Montana and Nevada will remain free of zombies. So they created a screenshot of the interactive mapping tool showing what a virus X-type hypothetical outbreak of zombies might look like in the continental United States several months into the outbreak. So your best bet is likely to head toward one of those 2 states, or to simply hunker down somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. Or if you are in Canada, there is a special guide that offers a list of the best and worst places for surviving an outbreak of zombies in Canada based on things like population density, the number of renewable energy sources, the number of buildings with basements, the number of hospitals, the number of military bases, the number of hunting gear shops, etc. So here's what you'll want in your zombie apocalypse kit. Now that we have a general idea of where to run and hide from the hypothetical zombies, let's consider what to pack. Back in 2011, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, launched a tongue-in-cheek campaign intended to engage the public with some emergency preparedness messages, but it proved to be quite effective. The CDC notes on its zombie preparedness website that it is just a tool that continues to reach a wide variety of audiences and all hazards preparedness via zombie preparedness. The website includes a blog, lesson plans for educators, and a graphic novel on the subject. So here are a few items that the CDC recommends putting in your emergency kit. Water, 1 gallon per person per day. Food, stock up on non-perishable items. Medications, prescription and over-the-counter meds. Tools and supplies, utility knife, duct tape, battery-powered radio, etc. Sanitation and hygiene, household bleach, soap, towels, etc. Clothing and bedding, a change of clothes for each family member and blankets. Important documents, driver's license, passport, birth certificate. First aid supplies. They won't do any good if you get bit by a zombie, but they'll come in handy for basic cuts and scrapes you might get while you're on the run or during a more realistic emergency like a hurricane or a tornado. Once you've made your emergency kit, the CDC recommends creating a family emergency plan so that everyone in your family knows where to go if zombies start showing up in the streets or during any number of more than likely new virus X emergencies. So how would MedTech respond to an outbreak of zombies? I can't help but wonder how the medical device industry would respond to a hypothetical outbreak of zombies. If we learn anything from the COVID-19 pandemic, is that this industry is full of really smart, hardworking people who are not afraid to jump in and start working on solutions to really big problems. From rushing supplies to the COVID-19 front lines, to working around the clock to develop COVID-19 tests and new ventilators, and to making sure those newly manufactured ventilators were properly tested, we saw countless examples of the medical device and diagnostics professionals stepping up in the early days of the pandemic to help wherever they could. So if there ever is an outbreak of zombies, you will count yourself fortunate to have a medical device engineer in your caravan party or entourage as well. While as usual, researching and developing a new vaccine will obviously fall under the pharmaceutical industry's purview, MedTech minds will surely play a very important and major role in helping us survive until a vaccine is available. So now, what about this article from Spre? Revealed, zombie outbreak is possible, and it only needs for the evolution of one parasite to happen. A zombie outbreak could occur, and it would only take the evolution of a certain virus or parasite to make it happen. This article was written by Sean Martin on Monday, July 19, 2021, and it was updated on Monday, July 19 of 2021, also at 7:40 p.m. It is one of the greatest fears of humanity, inspired by a bulk of Hollywood's scary horror movies, and scientists do believe that a zombie outbreak could happen. While it would be impossible to believe that the dead will rise and feed on the living, experts do think that a parasite could affect the brain or that a new virus could evolve. A parasite called Toxoplasmosa gondii is known to infect the brains of rodents. The parasite can then manipulate the rodent's behavior to make it fearless around cats, where the parasite is hoping to end up. The parasite has the ability to make the rodent head towards a cat where it will be eaten. However, what worries scientists is how similar rats and humans are, which is why they are used for testing drugs and medical breakthroughs. It is already believed that half of humans around the world have a dormant version of the parasite on their brains in the form of harmless cysts. Nonetheless, for some with immune deficiencies, the parasite has taken over, which has been linked to schizophrenia and suicidal tendencies. A study from the University of California revealed that the parasite is more powerful than previously thought. Wendy Ingham, who was involved in the study, says that the team tested the parasite on mice, which were ultimately unfazed by the presence of a predator once infected. She warned that Toxoplasma is dangerous. The idea that this parasite knows a lot more about our brains than we do, and has the ability to exert its desired change in complicated rodent behavior, is absolutely fascinating. Toxoplasma has done a phenomenal job of figuring out mammalian brains in order to enhance its transmission through a complicated life cycle. Other experts, however, believe that viruses like Virus X are what will ultimately turn the human race into zombies. Dr. Ben Newman, a professor of virology at the University of Reading, believes that a virus such as rabies could evolve and conquer humanity. He told Yahoo, and I quote, "There are parasites out there that get close to making actual walking around zombies," quote unquote. So please be very vigilant and watchful in the coming days, and be ready to hear a surprise news alert and possible statement from your local news and the WHO on this matter. Until next time, this is Apostle Yeshurun saying, goodbye, friends.
You have heard the messenger of the Lord with Apostle Yeshurun, preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. For more information on this podcast and this program, you may write us by email at Yeshurun, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. Again, that is Yeshurun, Yeshurun, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. This podcast was sponsored by the New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries, and by the free will offerings, tithes, and donations of those who are listeners of this podcast and are supporters of this great work of God. The preceding program has been a Plain and Simple Truth Ministries presentation.